Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Today we are following up on last week's topic of questions that people asked Jesus and looking instead at questions Jesus asked people. And what we've been discovering is that Jesus' questions are a lot more challenging than ours, and that they often invite us to change. That's true again with today's question, which is part of the story of blind Bartimaeus, another of my favorite stories in the Gospels. Let me remind you of the setting and the story. Jesus and his followers arrive one day in Jericho. Well, what's most interesting is that Jesus is drawing nearer to Jerusalem. Jericho is only about 15 miles from Jerusalem, and at this point in Mark's Gospel, Jesus is intently headed for Jerusalem to suffer and die for us. In fact, in Mark's Gospel, the very next story after Bartimaeus is his entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. The story itself is told simply. A blind man is sitting beside the roadside when, well, let's hear it how Mark tells it. They came to Jericho, and as he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" Let's take a brief pause in the story right there to focus on the question. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. And it's not as easy a question as it might seem at first. You see, sometimes we aren't sure what we want, and sometimes we might prefer to be stuck in self-destructive ways. Perhaps Bartimaeus was happy as a beggar and never having to work. Perhaps he liked sitting by the road all day and wanted nothing else. Or perhaps he was even more concerned for a sick relative than he was for his own issues. We simply don't know at this point. And so Jesus asked, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And that raises the second problem. So often we tend to treat God as some sort of cosmic Santa Claus, there to give us what we desire. We shoot a prayer up God's way and wait for the neatly wrapped up package to come our way. It's a struggle for me when people say things like, "God didn't answer my prayer," or "That's how prayer works." I always want to say, no, God didn't answer your prayer the way you wanted God to. And prayer isn't something we work like some kind of incantation or spell. Prayer isn't something that seeks to control God, but rather something that arises out of a relationship. Prayer isn't asking about things so much as it is sharing yourself with God. Prayer is a time to share your concerns, your joys, and all that your day was. Talking and listening with God, and most of all, feeling God near. Prayer isn't an opportunity to get God to do our will, but rather the opportunity to align ourselves with God's will. That's what we most need in life. For Bartimaeus, there on the roadside, God was near, and he knew what he longed and hoped for, to see again. And that's what Jesus did for him. But that's not the end of the story, however. No, when Bartimaeus regained his sight, he immediately jumped up and began to follow Jesus toward Jerusalem. Bartimaeus got his sight just in time to see his own salvation and our salvation as Jesus dies and rises. Even more interesting is, again, that the next story is Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And suddenly we have a story in contrasts. We have religious leaders who should see who Jesus is and who don't, contrasted with a man who can't see it all and who recognizes who Jesus is. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asks. He's done it on the cross. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.